story that really ticks me off. A Pennsylvania judge has been convicted for giving kids harsh sentences in private prisons for minor infractions. Why? Because the prisons were paying him, that's why. One kid who was sentenced by Judge Mark Ciavarella ended up committing suicide. Let's watch his mother confront the judge.
My kid's not here, he's dead! Because of him! He ruined my life! I'd like him to go to hell and rot there forever!
Ma'am, come on.
No, you know what he told everybody in court? They need to be held accountable for their actions. You need to be. Do you remember me? Do you remember me? Do you remember my son? An all-star wrestler? He's good. He shot himself in the heart. You scumbag!
Oh. Here now to discuss this are Laureen Transit, whose daughter was sentenced to a detention center by Judge Mark Ciavarella, the same one you just saw, Lourdes Rosado, Associate Director at the Juvenile Law Center, and Judge Glenda Hatchett, author of Dare to Take Charge, How to Live Your Life on Purpose. Let me start with you, Lourdes. Tell me about this case of this boy who committed suicide because of this horrifying judge.
It's a very sad case. Ed Kenzakowski was, like so many of the clients that we've met over the last few years, he was arrested on a minor charge, having drug paraphernalia on him, and he was quickly sentenced and sent to a detention facility and then to a boot camp for several months. It really began a downward spiral in his life. After he got out, his family says he wasn't the same. He started developing anger issues, got into trouble with the law again, and eventually committed suicide last year.
And what was he caught with? Drug paraphernalia?
I believe it was like a marijuana pipe.
That's it? That's it.
This was his first time involved in any kind of involvement with the criminal justice system, the juvenile justice system.
Judge Hatchett, this guy was sending children to detention centers 2 to 3 more frequently than judges in other counties. Okay, so I guess that's what they didn't. That didn't tip anybody off. How did he get away with that?
Because judges so often, Joy, operate in a bubble of autonomy, and it really wasn't until the law center got involved that other people started taking note. But really, he was just out here just acting independently. And I will tell you, the state Supreme Court, when they reviewed these cases, Joy, they wrote specifically that this was a travesty of justice. I mean, rarely do I get angry, but this is outrageous.
It's outrageous. And to see that distraught mother, it just breaks your heart.
My heart bleeds for her.
Yes. Now, Lourdes, how much money exactly was he getting for these kickbacks?
Well, when the original indictments came down, they alleged that he and another judge, Judge O'Connor, received something like $2.6 million from the developer and co-owners of these private for-profit detention facilities. He was convicted last week on racketeering charges, and the jury specifically found that he accepted at least $1 million in connection with this transaction.
There were other people involved with him and his family, weren't there? He wasn't the only one doing all the dirty deeds.
There was the other people involved were, like I said, the presiding judge at the time of the court, and as well as the person who developed had the construction company that developed the facilities, as well as the co-owner of the facility.
What about his wife? Did she know about it?
There are no allegations against the wife.
But the fact that the presiding judge was also involved added an extra layer of cover so that people probably really just weren't paying attention.
Yes. Okay, Laureen, now, your daughter Hillary was sentenced to a detention center by this judge. What did she do to get this sentence, and what was her sentence anyway?
My daughter Hillary was 15, and she was accused of creating a parody MySpace page of her assistant principal, and we went to court, a hearing that lasted about 60 seconds. She was adjudicated delinquent, which means legal and physical custody was taken away from her father and I, and she was sent to a boot camp for 3 months.
Because she did what? Because she had a parody of somebody on the internet?
That's right.
The page actually in question had a disclaimer on it that said this is a parody, this is a joke.
Oh,
this is not really this person's webpage.
Judge Hatchett, what happened to freedom of speech and expression?
Well,
how could that be a crime?
This is ridiculous. And the thing is, Joy, what we have to remember is that the private these private facilities are getting so much money based on how many children are in the facility. So the more children that are there, the more money they're going to get in per diems. But incarceration should be the last alternative. It should not be a situation like this. And this really is outrageous. So the Supreme Court went back and literally looked at every case between 2003 and 2008 and threw out some 4,000 decisions that he had made, because this is absolutely outrageous.
It's outrageous.
It's an abuse of power.
I mean, I was reading that a 12-year-old was sentenced to 2 years for joyriding in his mother's car.
In his mother's car.
How did this guy get away with this? Was no one watching this man? Where were all the? Was the police? Where were other judges? Where were the parents? Where was everybody?
Good
That's
question.
a great question.
Again, and it's also the problem is that judges often really are operating in an autonomous situation, but we took an oath to act in the public's best interest, not to abuse it. And so I think that oftentimes people just kind of accept the judge's decision, but these were absolutely an abuse of discretion.
Maureen, let me ask you, how has your daughter changed since her detention? That woman, Mrs. Fonzo, says her son was never the same. Do you relate to that?
You know, I was there at the courthouse when Mrs. Fonzo was shouting at the judge. I've heard that recording several times, and each time I start to cry because I realize there are thousands of children that could have happened to. For my daughter, I was very fortunate. My daughter was very fortunate in that I was able to get to the Juvenile Law Center, and they took her case realizing that this was probably just the tip of the iceberg, and they were right. So Hillary has some very lasting effects from her. She ended up being there for 1 month, and it was very traumatic for her.
Of course.
And I know for 1 month, I can't imagine what it's there for kids who were stuck there longer. I do want to say something about the parents.
Yes.
And why parents didn't say anything. Some of them did, but they really didn't know where to turn. Or they really, this has become almost a culture of corruption in this county and in this area, and I think they just, it was kind of, you can't fight City Hall. They didn't think they could win.
Right.
If I could add, I mean, one of the things that, well, we didn't know about the corruption, obviously, the payoffs until the U.S. Attorney issued its statement. What people did know was that Judge Ciavarella was regularly holding hearings without attorneys representing kids. They were very much like Hillary's hearing, where they were, in a matter of 60 seconds, 2 minutes, the kid was admitting to something without even knowing exactly what they were admitting to or what the consequences of admitting to a charge was. They didn't have an attorney, and then all of a sudden they were shackled and handcuffed and hauled out of the courtroom.
My God, it's like a dictatorship in that
Because
county.
an attorney could have raised the questions that you're asking, Joy. An attorney would have intervened in a situation. That's exactly why he was just railroading these children through, and parents were just kind of sitting there in absolute fear because there was no counter voice in these courtrooms.
Now, Judge Hatchett, what's going to happen to this judge? I hope they send him up for 50 years. What is going to happen to him?
It's going to be very interesting, and people have asked me whether I think he will get a more lenient sentencing because he is a judge, and I think not. I don't think he will.
He should get a more severe sentence because he is a judge. This reminds me of, the scandal in the church with the priests. These people are wolves in sheep's clothing and should get more detention and more prison time than the average person, because the kids trust these people. The people in this county trusted this guy.
This is absolutely right. He took an oath to uphold the law, not to abuse it.
And what about financial compensation? What about Laureen and her daughter? Shouldn't they get some money out of this?
That's going to be very interesting. I'd be interested to see what the person from the Law Center says, but I would think that there's a good case of a civil action here. It's hard to connect the child's suicide directly, but I think that there are some connections there that you can connect the dots.
Yes, we actually do have a federal civil rights action going on at this very time. We filed this lawsuit on behalf of, we're hoping to have a class certified of all the children who were adjudicated delinquent by this judge during the time period that he was taking the payoffs. and we are seeking monetary compensation through that forum, because obviously we can't through the criminal case.
All right, this is a terrible, terrible story, I think, and I just want to go out with Mrs. Fonzo, who appeared on CNN this weekend, because this woman it's just breaking my heart that she has to go through this because her son committed suicide because of this horrible person. Just watch this.
There is no justice. He'll never receive my sentence, what I have to live with every day of my life without my son. He left on that beautiful day yesterday to go back with his family. I have nothing anymore, and he still has nothing. It was all for nothing. It was all for greed and for more and more. He never had enough, and he took everything from me, and I'll never, never forgive him.
It's not about justice. It's not about agenda. It's not about mobilizing people. It's about dialing for corporate dollars. These two parties have sold the U.S. government and the American people to the highest bidders.